My brother-in-law said it so casually, like he was telling me the weather. My parents are staying with you starting next month. We've already told them. I didn't argue. I smiled, nodded, and said I'd think about it. But when their car turned into my driveway 3 weeks later, they found something they hadn't expected. And the look on my brother-in-law's face when he realized what he was looking at, that's the part I'll never forget. Let me back up. I retired at 63 after 31 years as a civil engineer. Bridges, overpasses, drainage systems. The kind of infrastructure people drive over without thinking twice. I liked that. I liked knowing the work held, that the calculations were right, that something I'd built was still standing after I walked away from it. When I retired, I did the same thing I'd always done with every project. I planned carefully, worked the numbers, and built something meant to last. The house in Asheville was the result of all that. 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a workshop in the back where I could putter with woodworking, a garden I'd always promised myself. My wife, Carol, God rest her, had talked about Asheville her whole life. She never got to see it. She passed 2 years before I closed on the property. So part of moving there was finishing something she'd started dreaming about. I did it for both of us. My daughter, Penny, called the day I got the keys. She cried a little, said Mom would have loved it. I told her I knew. Her husband, Dolph, said almost nothing that first call. But the next time I saw them, they drove up from Charlotte a few weeks after I moved in. He walked through every room like he was writing an appraisal. Didn't say much, but I watched his eyes. Civil engineering teaches you to notice load-bearing structures. I noticed his. We ate on the porch that evening. Penny talked about her job, her book club, the kids' school. Dolph talked about his parents, how his mother's knees were bad, how his father had retired and found it isolating, how the apartment they were renting in Gastonia was too expensive for what it was. I handed him the breadbasket. He smiled and said, "You've got all this space up here, Gil." Gil. My name is Gilbert, but Dolph had taken to calling me Gil the way men do when they want you to feel like a peer they can negotiate with. 4 bedrooms, he continued, and you're rattling around in here by yourself. My folks would love the mountain air. Penny looked at the table. I looked at my son-in-law. I'll think about it, I said, which was the wrong thing to say, I realize now. Because Dolph heard it as a yes with extra steps. The next 3 visits, he brought his parents up somehow, once in passing, once directly, once through Penny, who called me on a Tuesday evening and said, "Dad, I know it's a lot to ask, but Dolph's parents are really struggling. Could you maybe consider it, just for a little while?" I told her I'd think about it. But the evening Dolph called me himself, not Penny, Dolph, and said, "Gil, I've talked to my folks. They're planning to move in the first weekend of October. We'll bring them up Saturday. Just wanted to give you a heads up." I put down the phone and sat in the kitchen for a long time. Not a request. A heads up. He'd already told his parents. They were already planning. The moving date was already set. The only person he hadn't actually asked was me. I'm 66 years old. I built my career on understanding how structures fail. I know what it looks like when someone tests a load-bearing wall by pushing on it repeatedly from different angles, hoping eventually it gives. Dolph wasn't negotiating. He was eroding. I called my daughter back that night. "Penny, did you know Dolph already told his parents they could move in?" A pause. "He said you'd agreed." I said I'd think about it. 3 times. That's not agreement. Another pause, longer. "Dad, they really need this. Can't you just—" "I'll see you Saturday," I said. And I got off the phone and went to work. I've never been a man who fights with noise. I was raised to understand that preparation is its own kind of answer. When a bridge is engineered correctly, it doesn't need to shout at the water rushing underneath it. It just holds. So I held, and I prepared. First call was to my attorney, a man named Stu Freeling, who'd handled my property closing and knew real estate law in Buncombe County as well as anyone. I reached him the next morning, told him exactly what had happened, and he walked me through what I needed to understand. Gilbert, he said, you're the sole owner of that property. Nobody moves in without your consent. But here's what you need to know. If someone enters and stays for 30 days, they establish residency under North Carolina law. After that, eviction is a legal process. Takes time, takes money, takes court dates. So the line is the door, I said. The line is the door, he confirmed. Don't let them through it and you have complete authority. Let them in and it gets complicated. He drafted a no trespass notice for me. We discussed the option of having a law enforcement presence on Saturday. I chose yes. I called the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office, explained the situation, and arranged for a civil standby. 2 deputies, Saturday at noon. They were professional and matter-of-fact about it. This was not apparently unusual. Wednesday, I called a security company out of Weaverville. By Thursday afternoon, I had cameras on every corner of the property, live feed to my phone, motion alerts, a reinforced deadbolt on the front door, and a new locking gate at the end of the driveway that hadn't been there before. The technician who installed it tested it twice. Heavy steel, remote controlled from inside the house. That evening, Penny called. Dad, I just want to make sure everything's okay for Saturday. Harriet and Walt are so excited. Harriet and Walt? His parents had names now, in the context of my house, without anyone ever having asked whether I wanted them there. Everything will be ready Saturday, I said. We're thinking we'll get there around noon. Maybe 1. The moving truck's reserved for 8 in the morning. The moving truck was already reserved. I thanked her. Said I'd see them then. Friday evening, I called Stu one more time and reviewed the key phrases. I practiced them out loud, alone, in my kitchen, stripping out any emotion I might be tempted to include. This wasn't about anger. Anger is a distraction in structural work. You stay with the calculations. Saturday morning was October clear, the kind of sky you get in the mountains when the air has gone cold and honest. I was up at 5:30. Showered, dressed. Button-down shirt, gray slacks. This was a formal occasion. Coffee, eggs. I ate slowly and checked the camera feeds 3 times. At 11:50, the sheriff's cruiser came up my road and parked just past the gate. 2 deputies, a younger man named Petty and a woman, Sergeant Walls, who had the particular calm of someone who'd seen a lot of Saturdays like this one. Sergeant Walls shook my hand. Mr. Holt, she said, we'll hang back unless you need us. You do the talking. That's what I want, I said. At 12:10, my phone buzzed. Motion alert. I looked at the screen. 2 vehicles coming down my road. Dolph's blue pickup, and behind it, a white rental truck with the logo of a moving company on its side. I walked out to the gate, stood on my side of it. The deputies were 20 feet back, unhurried. The pickup slowed when the driver saw the gate. Slowed more when he saw me. Stopped completely when he saw the deputies. Dolph got out of the truck. He looked at the gate, at the sign I'd had mounted on it. White background, black letters, PRI Fate. Property / no TRS passing. Then at me. His face moved through about 4 expressions in 3 seconds. Gil. What is this? I'm not opening the gate, Dolph. He blinked. Looked back at the truck. The passenger door opened, and Penny stepped out slowly, her hand on the door like she needed steadying. The moving truck had stopped in the road behind them. The driver cut his engine. From the passenger side of the pickup, an older couple was climbing out. His parents, Harriet, was a small woman, wide-eyed, clutching her purse. Walt was tall, thinner than I'd expected, squinting at the scene with an expression I couldn't quite read. This is insane, Dolph said. We had an agreement. We didn't have an agreement, I said. You told me what was happening. I said I'd think about it. I've thought about it. The answer is no. Gil. My name is Gilbert. I said it without heat. Dolph, I've been thinking about this house since before you were part of this family. I earned it. I chose it for reasons that have nothing to do with extra square footage. I'm not taking in roommates regardless of who they are. Penny had walked around the front of the truck. Dad. Her voice was unsteady. They have nowhere to go. That's not accurate, I said. They have an apartment in Gastonia. They have a son who earns a good income and has a 3-bedroom house. What they don't have is my property. Dolph stepped toward the gate, and Sergeant Walls moved forward slightly. Not aggressively. Just visibly. He stopped. You can't do this, he said. I already have, I said. Sergeant Walls is going to hand you a document now. It's a formal no trespass notice. If you attempt to enter the property, it becomes a criminal matter. Sergeant Walls walked forward and offered it through the gate bars. Dolph took it like it might burn him. Read it once. Read it again. Harriet had started to cry. We were told it was settled. We packed everything we own. I looked at her. She was someone's mother, confused and embarrassed, standing in a road in a strange county. I didn't feel good about that part. But Dolph had put her here. Not me. Harriet, I said. I'm sorry you were told that. I never agreed to this. Not once. Dolph turned to Penny. Talk to him. Penny was looking at me with something I couldn't entirely name. Not anger exactly. Something harder to read. Dad, she said. Please. I love you, Penny, I said. I'm sorry you're in the middle of this. But I won't be told who lives in my house. Not by anyone. The moving truck driver leaned out his window. Look, I got 2 more jobs today. You people got an answer, or what? Dolph spun around. Spun back. His jaw was tight. He was a man who usually controlled the room, and the room had stopped cooperating. Fine, he said. Walt touched Harriet's arm. She was still crying softly. Walt himself hadn't said a word. He looked at me once, and I held his gaze, and in it I thought I saw something. Not agreement, but understanding. The quiet knowledge of someone who recognized that his son had made this mess. Penny walked back to the truck. She didn't look at me again before she got in. Dolph said, This isn't finished, Gil. He said it quietly, like a man who meant it. Maybe not, I said, but today is. They left. The moving truck followed. I stood at the gate until all 3 vehicles had disappeared around the bend in the road. Sergeant Walls came up beside me. Clean, she said simply. Thank you, I said, for being here. Just doing the job. You've got documentation from today with us. Your attorney did solid prep work. She nodded once. Take care, Mr. Holt. They left. I turned around and walked back to my house. Stood in the foyer, listened to the quiet. The house felt the same. Exactly the same. The afternoon light was coming through the windows at the angle I'd known it would when I chose this place. Everything I'd calculated was holding. The calls started that evening. I counted, over the next 11 days, 34 calls. Every one logged. Date, time, caller, duration, a summary of the voicemail content. I kept a spreadsheet, the same habit I'd used for project documentation across 3 decades. Dolph's messages were loud. You made my mother cry. You humiliated us in front of a stranger. You think this is over? You have no idea what I'm capable of. I saved every one. Pennies were quieter and much harder to listen to. Dad, I don't understand. I thought you were someone who believed in family. Why won't you just call me back? I need to hear your voice, please. I listened. I didn't respond. What was there to say that hadn't already been demonstrated? Every time I'd said, I'll think about it, Penny had reported it to Dolph as a yes. Every door I'd left slightly open, he'd walked through. Explaining myself wouldn't change the dynamic. Action already had. 3 weeks in, Stu called me. Gilbert. You're going to want to sit down. I sat. Dolph's retained an attorney. They're filing a family support action. The theory is that Harriet and Walt are effectively family by marriage, that you have the means to support them, and that they're in genuine need. North Carolina has that? There are provisions, rarely used and even more rarely successful. But it has to be defended of filing is real. What do you need from me? Everything you have. Every voicemail, every call log, every text, every piece of documentation from the property. And I want you to know, when they depose Penny, she's going to be asked about your relationship, your history. Be ready for that. I was quiet for a moment. I'll be ready, I said. The hearing was set for February. I had 4 months. I spent them the way I'd always spent project phases, thoroughly and without waste. I organized my evidence chronologically, cross-referenced it by type, created a summary document. Stu reviewed it and said it was the most thorough client documentation he'd seen in 20 years of practice. I told him I'd done it the same way I'd documented load calculations. Either the numbers support the structure, or they don't. We found a key fact in that time. Walt received Social Security and a pension from his employer. Harriet received Social Security. Their combined annual income was approximately $46,000. Dolph made, according to public records and Stu's research, somewhere north of $80,000 a year. His 3-bedroom house in Charlotte was under mortgage, but manageable. There was no genuine need. There was inconvenience. There was counting. There was the cost of figuring out a different solution, but there was no destitution. February came gray and cold. I put on a dark suit, drove to the Buncombe County Courthouse, met Stu in the lobby. He looked at my folder and said, "You're ready." I was. Dolph and Penny arrived with their attorney, a man in his 50s who carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to winning by volume. They sat at a separate table. Penny wouldn't look at me. Their attorney made his opening argument. Mr. Penny, Holt had a large property, lived alone, clearly had resources. His refusal to assist family members in need was heartless and possibly contrary to statute. He said the word heartless more than once. Then Penny took the stand. She answered questions in a voice I barely recognized. She said we'd never been particularly close, that I was devoted to my work more than to family, that when she'd needed me over the years, I'd been emotionally distant. I'd raised Penny alone from the time she was 11. Her mother had left, not died, left, and I'd been the one at every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every 2 a.m. fever. I'd driven her to college, helped her move into her first apartment, paid for the wedding where she'd married the man who was now asking a judge to compel me to house his parents. I kept my face neutral. I looked at Stu, who gave me a single nod. Then it was our turn. Stu set up a small speaker on the table. He pressed play, and Dolph's voice filled that wood-paneled room. "You think this is over? You have no idea what I'm capable of." Then another one. "I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you are. Your daughter will see what you really are. Then, you can't hide behind a gate forever, Gil. This isn't finished." The judge, a woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain, stopped writing and looked up. Stu let the silence sit. "Your Honor," he said, "the plaintiff did not ask Mr. Holt for help. He informed him, then threatened him when the answer was no. We are not looking at a case of familial neglect. We are looking at a case of coercion, followed by harassment." He went through the financials. Walt's pension, Harriet's Social Security, Dolph's income, their combined resources versus their stated need. The judge's pen stopped moving about halfway through. When she spoke, it was measured. The filial support claim is dismissed. The defendants have sufficient income to support themselves. Mr. Holt is awarded reasonable legal fees in the amount of $4,000 to be paid by the plaintiffs. She looked over her glasses at Dolph's attorney. The court also notes that the voicemail recordings are being referred to the DA's office for review. Threatening communications are not a family matter. This court is adjourned. The gavel was quieter than I expected. Outside, in the corridor, Dolph walked past me without a word. His attorney followed close behind, already on his phone. Penny came last. She stopped in front of me. Her face was exhausted, stripped down. "I didn't know," she said quietly. About the voicemails. He told me you'd agreed, and I wanted to believe him. It was easier. I know, I said. I'm sorry for what I said. I'm sorry for what I said. On the stand. Her voice broke slightly. About not being close. That's your story to own, I said. I know what I did. I don't need you to correct the record for me. She stood there. I could see she was trying to decide what came next. I love you, Dad. I know that too, I said. But love doesn't mean I surrender my life to whatever your husband decides I should be willing to give. I turned and walked toward the elevator. The hallway behind me was quiet. Things were not over. I knew that. Men like Dolph don't accept the first defeat. They regroup, recalculate, find another angle. I'd spent enough time in project management to know that. What I hadn't calculated was that the next move would come at 2:15 in the morning. The pounding started somewhere in my sleep. Heavy, rhythmic, then desperate. I was sitting up before I was fully awake, heart banging in my chest. More pounding. And then Dolph's voice, muffled through the front door. Gil, open this door. We're going to talk like men. Right now. Open it. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand. Pulled up the security feed. Front camera. Dolph on my porch. Both fists. He looked wrecked. No jacket in the cold. Hair disordered. Eyes bright with something, drink or rage or both. I didn't go downstairs. I dialed 911. I have a man at my door who's been threatening me and is now pounding on my property at 2 in the morning. Yes, I know him. Yes, there's a history. No, I don't feel safe. The operator kept me on. I watched the feed. Dolph tried the door handle, kicked the base of the door, shouted something I couldn't make out. Across the road, a porch light came on. 6 minutes later, blue lights swept up my road. 2 patrol cars. 3 deputies. I watched through the camera as they approached. Saw the moment Dolph registered them. Saw him decide to argue. This is a family situation. He's refusing to talk to me. He's been, Sir, step back from the door. You don't understand. His daughter is, Sir, final warning. Dolph made the decision to step forward instead of back. It took about 8 seconds after that. They had him in handcuffs by the time I came downstairs and opened the door. One deputy asked if I was all right. I said yes. Showed him the camera system, the recordings. Stu's no trespass documentation. Dolph was charged that night with criminal trespass, disturbing the peace, and resisting a lawful order. I watched the patrol car leave from my porch in the cold dark, hands in my pockets. I went back inside. Backed up the footage to 2 external drives, and my cloud storage, made a cup of tea I didn't particularly want. Sat in the kitchen until the sky started to lighten. By 9 the next morning, Penny was at my gate. I checked the camera before I went out. She was alone. No car behind her. She'd walked or parked somewhere down the road. She looked like she hadn't slept. I pressed the intercom. Penny. Dad, please. Let me come in. I looked at the screen for a long moment. Stay at the gate, I said. I'll come out. I walked down the driveway in my coat. She was standing with her hands in her jacket pockets, face red from cold, eyes raw. I bailed him out this morning, she said. I went to the jail. I waited. He wasn't sorry. She laughed, but it came out wrong. He was furious. At you, at the deputies, at me for not being angrier. He kept saying you'd started it. That you were the one who... She stopped. Pressed her hand to her mouth for a second. Dad, he drove to your house at 2 in the morning and pounded on the door. And he thinks you started it. Yes, I said. She looked at me. I've been defending him for 6 years. To you, to Mom, to my friends. I kept saying he was just passionate, just protective of his family. She shook her head. I heard those voicemails in court, but even then I thought maybe you'd said something that set him off. Maybe I'd missed something. She stopped. But there's no missing what happened last night. There's no version of that where he's not. She couldn't finish the sentence. I said, "What are you going to do?" She looked at the mountains over my shoulder. The morning was clear, cold, the kind of light that makes you see things exactly as they are. "I have an appointment with a family attorney on Thursday," she said. "Don't ask me if I'm sure." "I'm sure." I nodded. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry, Dad. I let him make me into someone who testified against you in court. I said things that weren't true, or things I'd twisted into something that wasn't true because it was easier than looking at what was actually happening in my marriage." "You said we were never close," I said, "that I was absent." "I know. I drove 8 hours round trip to watch you in a one-act play your senior year of high school. The part you had 3 lines in." She was crying by then. "I know you don't need to fix that right now," I said. "What you said in that courtroom is yours to sit with, not mine. I know what I did. I know who I am." I paused. "But I'm still your father. I'm not going to pretend otherwise." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Can I come back? Not to stay. Just visit. Can we try?" "Yes," I said. "We try." The restraining order was issued the following week. Dolph had to stay 100 yards from my property. The criminal case was pending, Stowe told me, and between the arrest record, the voicemails, and the security footage, the DA wasn't inclined to be lenient. Walt called me once, about 3 weeks after the courthouse. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. He sounded old. Older than I expected. "Mr. Holt," he said, "I know you don't have any reason to take this call." I picked up, I said. "I know what Dolph did, the night at your gate, and the other night too." He was quiet for a moment. "I didn't ask him to do any of it. We didn't know until after the fact, most of it." I said nothing. "We found a place," he said. "Over in Black Mountain. Small. It's enough. Harriet's closer to her sister there." Another pause. "I just wanted you to know we weren't part of the—" He stopped. "We didn't know." "I believe you," I said, and I meant it. He thanked me and got off the phone. I stood in my workshop for a while after that, running a hand along the piece of walnut I'd been shaping for a week, feeling the grain under my fingers. Some things you can't engineer your way out of. Some damage to relationships is structural, goes too deep. Some of it, with time and the right conditions, can be repaired. Penny came up the first Saturday in March. Just her. She brought food from a place in Asheville she'd read about and I'd never tried. We ate at the kitchen table and talked, carefully at first, then more easily, about small things, the kids, her work, a documentary she'd watched that she thought I'd like. She cried twice. I almost did once when she mentioned her mother. We didn't talk about the courthouse or the gate or the voicemails. Not that day. Those were structures that needed more time before they could hold weight. At the door, on her way out, she hugged me. Not a polite hug. The real kind, held for a moment. "Same time next week?" she asked. "Yes," I said. The divorce was finalized in September. The custody arrangement gave Penny primary custody of the kids, Dolph supervised visitation, and child support based on his income. The criminal case ended with a plea, no jail time, but community service, probation, and a permanent record that would follow him. His own firm had already let him go during the proceedings. Too many absences, too much noise. I didn't feel triumphant about any of it. I felt the same thing I'd felt after every well-constructed project, that it had done exactly what it was designed to do. No more, no less. By fall, Penny had settled into a routine. She and the kids came most weekends. My granddaughter, 7, had adopted a particular corner of my workshop as hers, where she'd sit with a scrap of wood and some sandpaper and make what she called furniture for bugs. My grandson, 9, had decided he was going to learn to fish, and I'd taken him down to the creek behind the property twice. On a Sunday in October, a year, almost exactly, from that morning at the gate, we were all on the porch when the clouds rolled back and the mountains went gold. Penny had her tea. I had mine. The kids were in the yard. "Are you happy here, Dad?" Penny asked. I watched my grandson chase a leaf across the grass. Yes, I said, I am. She was quiet for a moment. I'm glad you fought for it. I know I didn't make it easy. You didn't, I said. But you're here now. That matters. She nodded. But you're here now. That matters. She nodded. We sat together in the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. My grandson leapt up from the yard and shouted, Grandpa, can we come next weekend too? I called back, that's the plan. He grinned and went back to his leaf. I looked at the mountains. The light was doing what it does in October at this elevation, turning everything honest, stripping away the softness, showing you what's really there. The trees, the ridge, the sky. My porch. My house. My family, such as it was, rearranged by a year's worth of hard decisions into something smaller but truer. I'd spent 31 years building things that had to hold, not things that looked right from a distance, not things that performed under ideal conditions, but things that held when the pressure came, when the load exceeded what anyone expected, when the weather turned and the ground shifted and the calculations that had seemed abstract on paper were suddenly all that stood between you and failure. I'd done the same thing here, and it was holding. That was enough. That had always been enough.